Please like, share, and subscribe. Wishing you happiness and good luck every day.
Have you ever felt like the dream is always just out of reach? You know, that perfect job, that ideal relationship, that moment when everything is finally going to click into place. Well, what if that whole way of thinking is wrong? Today, we're diving into Nick Nilson's book, You Can Live the Dream, which flips that idea on its head. It argues that fulfillment isn't some destination you have to chase, but a choice you can make right now. Let's get into it.
Right out of the gate, the book hits you with this powerful challenge. It's not about waiting around for your circumstances to be perfect. The author is basically saying that the life you've always wanted isn't hiding in the future. It's available to you in this very moment. It just takes a fundamental shift in how you think about it.
So let's really sit with this question for a second. What if all that peace and joy and fulfillment we're all searching for isn't tied to what we achieve, but to a simple internal decision we make every single day? This is the core idea we're going to unpack.
And that leads us right into the first major principle from the book, the incredible power of your perspective. The whole argument here is that you can't always control what happens to you, but you can always control how you see it. And you know what? That changes everything.
Just think about it like this. Two people can go through the exact same event. One sees it as a total failure, a door slamming shut. But the other person, they see it as a lesson, an opportunity, a success. The event didn't change at all, but their internal lens did. The book has this one perfect story that just nails this idea.
Okay, check out this story from the book. Nilson takes his 5-year-old son fishing. From his point of view, the trip is a complete bust. No bites, nothing. He's feeling like a failure. But when he asks his son if he had a good time, his son's face just lights up and he says, "Dad, I loved drowning worms with you." The kid thought the entire point was just to drown the worms. So in his eyes, it was a total success. How amazing is that?
And that just perfectly sums up the whole idea, doesn't it? It was never about catching fish. It was about the shared experience. Your reality isn't shaped by the facts of your life, but by the story you tell yourself about those facts. That's where all the power is.
So, if perspective is the first key, the second one is all about letting go. The book argues that you just can't move forward into a new season of your life if you're still clinging on for dear life to the old one. You've got to make some space.
It's such a simple but really profound idea. If you want to grab hold of everything that's ahead of you,
Then you first have to open your hands. You've got to be willing to release what's behind you. And the book uses this fantastic metaphor to explain this.
Think about driving a car. I mean, it's so obvious, right? The windshield is massive because what's in front of you is the most important thing. The rearview mirror, it's tiny. It's there for a quick glance, not for you to stare into while you're trying to drive forward. Your life is exactly the same. Your future is the windshield, your past is the rearview mirror. So the real question is, where's your focus?
Nilson breaks this whole idea down into 3 practical steps. First, let go of past mistakes. They are not your identity. Second, release old identities that are holding you back. He tells the story of a blind beggar named Bartimaeus who threw off his beggar's coat, the very symbol of his old life, before he was even healed, as this huge act of faith in his future. And third, let go of the need for absolute control. It's about finding peace by accepting that some things are just not in our hands.
And all of this flows so perfectly into the third big principle, progress over perfection. This is one I think we can all relate to. It's about finding joy in the journey itself, not just waiting around for the finish line. It's about learning to celebrate where you are right now.
The book gives this a name, the partial victory. So often we wait until we've completely crushed a goal to feel good about it. But a partial victory is all about celebrating the small, incremental wins along the way.
This analogy is just perfect. When a baby takes one wobbly step, the whole family goes wild. We clap, we cheer. Nobody says, "Yeah, well, call me when they run a marathon." Of course not. We celebrate the progress. Yet as adults, for some reason, we forget to give ourselves that same grace.
So did you take just one step in the right direction today? Maybe you made one healthy choice or had one difficult conversation you've been avoiding. In this way of thinking, that's a huge victory, and it's absolutely worth celebrating.
Or maybe your goal is to lose 50 pounds, but you lose 5. Is that a failure to lose 50? No way. That is a success in losing 5. You see the difference? It's all about perspective and celebrating the good that's happening on the way to the great.
The author paints this great picture of a house being built. You know, in the middle of construction, it's a mess. There's mud, dust, exposed wires. It looks like total chaos. But the architect isn't stressed because they have the blueprint. They can see the finished product. Your life is just like that. It is okay to be a work in progress. The mess is just part of the process.
Okay, so let's bring this all together. Living the dream isn't about some far-off fantasy land. It's about a series of conscious choices you make today, right here, in the middle of your perfectly imperfect life.
Just like the book says, the whole idea is to trade that feeling of disappointment for a sense of peace and joy that's available to you right now, not later.
So when you boil it all down, it comes back to these three things. First, shift your perspective. You can't control what happens, but you can always control how you see it. Second, let go of the past to make room for what's next. And third, celebrate your progress. Find that joy in the journey by celebrating every single small win. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. What is just one thing, one circumstance, one memory, one tiny step that you can choose to see differently, starting right now? Okay, so let me set the scene for you. There's this dad, and he's super excited to take his 5-year-old son Denver fishing for the very first time. You know, he's picturing this perfect father-son tradition starting. He's got the poles, the snacks, the worms, the whole shebang. Everything is ready for a perfect summer afternoon out on the bayou.
But here's the thing. From the dad's perspective, the trip was a complete and total failure. They're out there for an hour in the hot sun, and they don't get a single bite. Not one. He's feeling pretty bummed, thinking he's failed and that his son is never ever going to want to go fishing again. So on the drive home, he finally breaks the silence and asks Denver if he had a good time. And his son's answer? Well, it just changes everything.
Drowning worms? The dad is just stunned. The entire time, his son thought the whole point of the trip was to drown worms. And since they went through like 24 of them, he thought the day was a massive success. And in that one simple, kind of hilarious moment, the dad learned this huge lesson about the power of perspective.
So let's just break this down. You have the exact same event, but two completely different realities. On one side, you've got the father's view. The goal was catching fish. The result, failure and disappointment. But on the other side, you've got the son's view. The goal was just hanging out with dad and, drowning worms. The result, total success and pure joy. It's the same afternoon, but two totally different experiences, all because of the lens they were looking through. And that really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? Perspective is the lens we choose to look through. Look, we can't always choose what happens to us. The day the fish aren't biting, the traffic jam, that unexpected bill, but we can always choose how we see it. We can always choose how we think about it, and that changes everything.
This is such a game-changing idea. It means you don't have to wait for all your problems to magically disappear before you can feel peace or contentment. Those feelings aren't dependent on having a perfect life. They're internal. They're a product of the perspective you decide to have right here, right now.
So how does this whole idea of choosing our lens actually play out in real life? Let's dig into another story. This one's about arriving at a hotel in Southern California, and it's a perfect example of how just a small shift can totally change your reality.
So imagine you pull up to this hotel. On the ground floor, it is absolute chaos. You've got jackhammers pounding concrete, cement trucks everywhere, managers yelling through megaphones. It is loud, it's stressful, it's a total mess. But then you get in the elevator, you go up to the 10th floor, and you step out onto the balcony. And just like that, all that noise is gone. It's replaced by this incredible sunset and the sound of ocean waves. The address didn't change, but your elevation, your perspective did.
And that's such a key takeaway. For a lot of people, this points to a deeper truth. It means you can be standing right in the middle of all that chaos and still find peace. It's not about pretending the problems aren't there, but about lifting your perspective higher, to see beyond the immediate problem to a much bigger picture, to what some would call a greater promise. All right, let's keep going. We're going to look at two more really powerful stories that show how choosing a different lens can redefine some seriously tough stuff, like a career-ending injury or facing impossible odds. Okay, so this author's whole dream was to be a star running back in the NFL. And in his senior year of high school, he was absolutely on fire. Leading the district, colleges were looking at him. Then, fourth game of the season, one single hit to the knee changes everything. A torn ACL and MCL. Just like that, his dream was gone.
But during that long, painful recovery, something really unexpected started to happen. His desire, his passion, it started to shift away from football and toward ministry.
And that's the pivot point. What felt like the absolute end of his story was actually just a redirection. That painful, slam-shut door was the very thing that guided him to his true purpose. He ended up turning down football opportunities to go into ministry, and today, he's a pastor at one of the biggest churches in America. That injury wasn't the end. It was actually a blessing in disguise that led him straight to his destiny.
This brings us to a really powerful story from the Bible. The prophet Elisha and his servant wake up one morning and their house is completely surrounded by a huge enemy army. The servant, well, he's terrified. He sees the facts. They are completely, hopelessly outnumbered. But Elisha is totally calm. He sees a different reality, and he prays for his servant's eyes to be open.
And when the servant looks again, he sees the entire hillside is filled with a heavenly army, with horses and chariots of fire. Now, the facts on the ground hadn't changed. That enemy army was still there. But his perspective was elevated. He could now see beyond the opposition to a greater reality. And he realized the forces on his side were way, way bigger. So, what do all these stories have in common? We've got drowning worms, a noisy hotel, a football injury, a heavenly army. What's the common thread here? Well, they all point to one final, really empowering truth about who gets to write the ending.
And that's a question worth really thinking about. When you face a setback, a failure, a closed door, who do you let define what that means? Do you let the circumstance itself write the conclusion, or do you believe there's a different author at work?
I mean, think about it. A mistake you made, an illness, losing a job, those things can feel like the end of a chapter, or maybe even the end of the whole book. But this perspective says, nope, they're not. They can't be, because you're not the final author. When you shift your focus from the problem to the promise, you're basically handing the pen back to the one who can turn any setback into a setup for an amazing comeback.
So, at the end of the day, what's holding you back probably isn't your circumstances. It's the lens you're looking at them through. So what if, today, you just chose to see a different reality? What if you chose to see not a failed fishing trip, but a really awesome day of drowning worms? It's your story. How are you going to choose to see it?
Have you ever held onto something so tightly that you actually caused the very crash you were trying to avoid? Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today. This powerful idea that sometimes the only way to really move forward is to let go. So yeah, let's explore how letting go can set you free. Just imagine hearing that screamed at you. You're 10 years old and your life is flashing before your eyes. And no, this isn't some dramatic scene from a movie. This was a very real, life-altering experience for the author of our source text. Okay, so picture this. He's on this super powerful mini bike for the first time. It's called El Tigre. He hits the throttle and whoosh, the bike just shoots forward. He's almost thrown off. So what's his first instinct? What would yours be? To hold on tighter, right? Well, here's the catch. The grip was the throttle. So the tighter he held on, the faster he went, just rocketing toward disaster. And this is where we get the big lesson for the day. Right before he's about to slam into this huge tree, he finally lets go. The bike crashes, sure, but he's safe. And he learned that sometimes holding on is the very thing that limits our growth, that delays our destiny. You know what I'm talking about? It's that job you're scared to leave, or that relationship that's over but you just won't end it. It really makes you ask, right? Where am I holding on too tight? So that brings us to our first major idea here, letting go of the past. The source material uses this incredible story of the Israelites leaving Egypt. They're literally moving from a place of slavery toward a land of promise. I mean, sounds like a pretty easy choice, doesn't it? Well, as it turns out, it wasn't that simple at all. Because Egypt, even with all its misery and slavery, was familiar. It was predictable. The Promised Land, on the other hand, that was their destiny. Yeah, a place of freedom. But it was also completely unknown. And that fear of the unknown can make something familiar, even if it's a familiar pain, feel weirdly safe. And get this. This is the real kicker. A journey that should have taken like a few weeks ended up taking 40 years. 40! Can you imagine? And why? Because every single time things got a little tough out there in the desert, they started talking about the good old days back in Egypt, forgetting, of course, that they were slaves. They just couldn't let go. And man, isn't that just a deep human truth? When you can't see the future clearly, it's so easy to just dwell in the past. Our brains naturally retreat to what's known, even if that known thing was actually holding us captive. So think about it. What's your Egypt? Maybe it's an old relationship, a bad habit, or a past version of yourself. Okay, so if clinging to the past is so dangerous, how do you actually make a clean break? Well, that brings us to this next idea. Burning the plows. This is all about making a decision, a commitment to your new future that's so total you can't go back. There's this amazing story about a man named Elisha. He gets called to this whole new destiny, and what does he do? He goes back to his farm, takes the oxen he used to plow his fields, and slaughters them. Then he takes his plowing equipment, his whole livelihood, and uses it as firewood to cook a big farewell meal. I mean, he literally destroys his old way of life. Why? So that when things got tough, going back wasn't even an option. There was nothing left to go back to. Or how about this one? A blind beggar named Bartimaeus. His coat wasn't just a coat. It was basically his license to beg. It was his entire identity, his only way to survive. And when Jesus calls out to him, he throws that coat aside before he's even healed. Think about that. That's a huge act of faith, right? Letting go of the old you to make room for the new one. Okay, but let's talk about maybe the hardest thing of all to let go of, our own mistakes, our failures, the stuff that just haunts us. And for that, we've got to look at the story of the Apostle Peter, a guy who failed in a really, really big way. Have you ever been there? You promise yourself or you promise God, I'm never going to do that again, I'm going to be better, and then you do it again. We've all been there. With Peter, he literally swore up and down he would never deny Jesus. And then on the absolute worst night of his life, he did it. Not once, but 3 times. Now, this is where the story gets really incredible. There's this tiny detail that's so important. The Bible specifically says that when Peter denied Jesus, he was warming himself by a charcoal fire. So fast forward, Jesus has been resurrected, he finds Peter, who's totally defeated and has gone back to his old life, and what's the first thing Jesus does? He builds another charcoal fire right there on the beach. And sitting there around this second fire, Jesus doesn't yell at him, he doesn't shame him, he just asks him 3 times, "Do you love me?" One question for every denial. See, he wasn't rubbing Peter's nose in his failure. He was wiping the slate clean. He was offering him total restoration. So you see the difference? One fire was the scene of his failure. The other fire was the scene of his future. God doesn't define you by your mistakes. He doesn't come back to remind you of what you did wrong. He comes back to remind you that his love is way bigger than your mistake. So this whole idea of letting go of the past, of our failures, it all leads to maybe the biggest challenge of all, letting go of control. You know that feeling, right? That if we can just manage every little detail, everything will turn out okay. But the truth is, most of the time, that control is just an illusion. I love this analogy the source text uses. Okay, a basketball. In my hands, it's worth, what, $20? I could maybe score a few points at the local court. But you take that exact same ball and put it in the hands of, say, LeBron James. Suddenly, it's worth millions. It can win championships. See? The potential of the ball didn't change, but the hands holding it did. And that's a perfect picture of what we're talking about. When we try to control everything ourselves, we're limiting the potential. But when we let go and put our lives, our futures, our relationships into hands that are way more capable, that's when a potential gets unlocked that we could never, ever reach on our own. So after all this, why? Why do we do all this letting go? Releasing the past, our mistakes, that need for control? It's really simple. It's to make room. You just can't grab hold of the new thing waiting for you if your hands are still clenched tight around the old stuff. Just think about your car for a second. There's a very good reason the windshield is huge and the rearview mirror is tiny. It's because what's in front of you is so much more important than what's behind you. Your future is meant to be way bigger than your past. The author shares this amazing piece of wisdom from his grandmother, who lived to be 98. Someone asked her, what's the secret to a long, happy life? And she just said she doesn't get stuck in the past. She lets go of mistakes and offenses, and instead, she holds on to her faith and her hope. So simple, but so profound. And really, that leaves all of us with a pretty big question. What's waiting for you on the other side of letting go? What new beginning? What kind of freedom? What promotion? What peace is just waiting for you to finally make some room for it? What amazing purpose is out there just waiting for you to decide to let go?
All right, today we're going to dive into an idea that is so simple, but honestly, it can totally change the game when it comes to hitting your goals. We're talking about choosing progress over perfection.
So let me ask you this. Have you ever felt like just throwing in the towel because things are moving just so slowly? I mean, we've all been there, right? You're pouring your heart into something, a new habit, a big project, whatever it is, and it just feels like you're stuck in neutral. It's so frustrating. But what if that frustration, that urge to quit, is actually based on a big misunderstanding of how growth really, truly works?
Okay, to really get this, I want to share a story about, of all things, landscaping. Yeah, stay with me here, because it perfectly shows how something that looks like a total failure on the outside might actually be a huge sign of progress happening where you can't even see it.
So the story goes like this. The author and his wife Summer were super excited about their new backyard. They went all out, planting trees, flowers, the whole 9 yards. They had this vision of a beautiful, blooming oasis. But then, a few weeks go by and panic starts to creep in. The brand new trees look terrible, like really bad. They were wilting, they looked like they were dying, and you can just imagine them thinking, oh no, we've made a massive, super expensive mistake.
So what do? You call in the expert. And they did. Not once, not twice, but 6 times. And every single time the landscaper told them the exact same thing. He was like, look, I know the leaves look rough, but that's not where the action is right now. The real work, the important stuff, is happening underground beneath the surface. Those roots were busy settling in, getting a solid grip and learning how to pull in all the good stuff from the soil.
And that right there, that's our first big takeaway. Because isn't that just like us? We go through these seasons where it feels like nothing is happening on the outside. We're not seeing the results, but under the surface, we're putting down roots, we're building strength, laying a foundation for everything that's coming next. It's a reminder that progress is a process, not an event.
Okay, so if we're going to value the process, that leads us to this really cool principle for how to find value in all the unfinished parts of our lives. Seriously, this is a mindset shift that can reframe your whole journey.
Now, the source material points out something really fascinating from the creation story in Genesis. Check this out. On day 1, light is created and it's called good. Day 2, the sky, good. Day 3, land and plants, good. It goes on like this for 5 straight days. Each step of the way, even though the project was totally incomplete, it was called good. It wasn't until day 6, when everything was finally finished, that it got the upgrade to very good.
And that brings us to what might be the single most important idea we're talking about today. If you don't learn how to see, and I mean really appreciate, the good in the unfinished, you'll never make it to very good. You have to find the value in the messy middle if you ever want to get to the finish line.
Okay, that sounds great, right? But how do we actually do that, like in our real lives? Well, the key is to get super practical and build a habit of celebrating every single win, no matter how small you think it is.
And the answer is actually really simple, but so powerful. We have to stop waiting. Stop waiting for the big, flashy finish line moment to feel good about what we're doing. Instead, we have to learn to celebrate the partial victories along the way.
So what exactly counts as a partial victory? Well, it's pretty much anything that moves the needle forward. You're not totally out of debt yet, but you just paid off 1 credit card? That's a huge win. You haven't hit your goal weight, but you lost 5 pounds? That's amazing progress. You're not done with your degree, but you finished 1 year? Come on. Each one of those moments is a good on the path to very good. They absolutely deserve to be celebrated.
Let me give you a sports analogy that really hammers this home. Picture a basketball game. A player makes 1 free throw. It's just 1 point, right? It's not the game-winning shot. It's not the championship buzzer beater.
But what happens right after they make it? Their teammates are right there, high-fiving them, patting them on the back. Why? Why do they do that for just 1 point? Because pro athletes get it. They know that those tiny little wins build momentum. They create confidence. It's all about celebrating the progress, not just the final score.
And here's something really important. Sometimes what looks like a small step to the outside world is a giant leap for you. The author shares a really personal story about his wife, Summer, who struggles with severe vertigo. For her, just driving for an hour in heavy traffic was a monumental win.
Her friends didn't just say, "Oh, you drove your car." No, they got it. They saw the incredible battle she won to do that, and they celebrated with high fives. That's the kind of energy we need to bring for ourselves and for the people around us.
Okay, so celebrating small wins. Got it. But what about when it's not just slow? What about when it's just hard? You know those seasons where every single step feels like you're walking through mud? Well, let's talk about that, because we need to reframe how we think about difficulty itself. This story from the source is just hilarious. The author's 5-year-old son, Denver, comes home from his very first day of kindergarten, and he is just wiped out. The next morning, they tell him it's time to get ready for school, and he is genuinely shocked. He's like, "Wait, I have to go again?" In his little mind, he'd already done it. He checked the box. He couldn't believe it wasn't a one-and-done kind of thing.
And his reaction is so telling, isn't it? It teaches us something huge. Growth is rarely easy, and it's almost never a one-time event. You know, we have this tendency to think that if something is really hard, it must mean we're doing it wrong. But what if the opposite is true? What if hard doesn't mean you're on the wrong path? What if hard actually means fruitful?
Here's a great way to think about it: the bouncy ball principle. Imagine you have a super bouncy ball. If you drop it on a soft, plush carpet, what happens? Nothing. It just sort of thuds. Its potential is completely hidden. But what happens when you throw that same ball against the hard surface, like a concrete wall? Bam! It flies back, revealing all that bounce-back power it had inside. The hard surface is what unlocks its potential. And it's the same for us. It's the challenges, the hard times, that reveal our own resilience, our own bounce-back power.
So you see, the point isn't to never fall down. That's impossible. The real test is what happens next. Do you get back up? Progress is never a perfectly straight line going up. It's messy. It's about falling down 7 times and getting up 8. Tapping into that bounce-back power every single time.
All right, let's wrap all of this up with one last image. A powerful way to think about yourself and your own messy, beautiful, unique journey of growth.
I want you to picture yourself as a house that's under construction. That's you, right now. You are a work in progress.
And if you've ever seen a construction site, you know it can look like a total disaster zone, right? There's mud everywhere, it's raining, there are tools and scraps all over the place. It looks chaotic. But here's the thing: the architect isn't panicking. Why? Because the architect has the blueprint. They know exactly what it's going to become, and they know all this mess is just a required part of building something amazing.
And that is the final thought I want to leave you with. All the messy parts of your life, the struggles, the setbacks, the things that feel unfinished, they don't mean you're a failure. Not at all. They just mean the job isn't done yet. You're a masterpiece in the making, and the mess is just proof that good work is being done.
So as we wrap this up, I've got one question for you. Take a look at your own construction site, your life, and just for a second, forget about being perfect. What's one small win, one partial victory, one made free throw? What is one thing you can celebrate today?
You know, we've all been there. That moment when a dream or this big opportunity or maybe a calling is right there in front of us, but so is this giant wall of fear, and it can be absolutely paralyzing, right? But what if I told you there was one simple, really powerful principle that could help you step right through that fear? Okay, let's dive into this, and we're going to start with an incredible true story.
I want you to imagine this feeling for a second. You're 14,000 feet up in the air, crammed onto the metal floor of this tiny little plane. And then, all of a sudden, the instructor slides the side door open, and this deafening blast of wind just rips through the cabin. Yeah, this is that exact moment when things get very, very real.
So this whole story starts with a college student named Nick. And he decides, for the first time ever, he's going to go skydiving. He goes through all the training, signs all the waivers, you know the drill, and gets strapped to this tandem instructor who's rocking a bleached blonde mohawk. And with every single step, you can just feel his nervousness building.
As that plane climbs, man, the terror just climbs right along with it. At 12,000 feet, his hands are sweating, his heart is just pounding out of his chest. Then bam, they hit 14,000 feet, and that door slides open. He literally watches his friends just get to the edge and vanish, one by one. And as it becomes his turn, his own mind is just screaming at him, "I can't do this, turn back! I don't even remember what I'm supposed to do!"
He's inching his way to the edge, totally reluctant, having second, third, fourth thoughts. And right there, at the absolute peak of his panic, just as he steps onto the ledge,
his instructor leans in and says the 6 words that changed everything. Nick, you just gotta do it afraid.
And before he could even think of a reply, they were gone. They were falling, a 60-second free fall of pure adrenaline. And then the chute opens and everything just becomes quiet and calm. He's soaring, he's actually controlling the parachute, taking in this breathtaking view of Chicago. It just proves that one of the best moments of his entire life was locked behind a single terrifying step, a step he had to take while he was still afraid.
So that crazy story perfectly illustrates a principle that we can apply anywhere, even if, we're not planning on jumping out of planes anytime soon. Let's call it the principle of motion-activated blessings.
Think about the automatic doors at a supermarket or a Target. They stay completely shut until they sense your movement, right? It's your step toward them that triggers them to open. Well, life's opportunities, blessings, and breakthroughs are often the exact same way. They're just waiting for you to make a move.
And this isn't some new idea. The source material actually points to this wisdom in an ancient text, Psalm 37:23, which says, "The Lord directs the steps of the godly." Now notice that specific word, steps, not stance. The idea is you can't be guided if you're standing still. You have to be in motion to be directed. And here is the absolute best part of this whole thing. The size of that first step, it doesn't matter at all. It's the action itself that counts. So let's look at a few quick stories that illustrate this brilliantly.
Okay, meet Summer. She and her husband were praying to move to a better school district for their daughter, but the houses just seemed way out of their price range. So while her husband was praying, Summer started taking this small step of faith. She began collecting empty cardboard boxes from her work, preparing for a move that looked totally impossible. I mean, her husband kept throwing them in the recycling.
But she just kept bringing them home, and guess what? Months later, those very same boxes were filled with their belongings as they moved into their new house. They sold their old one for the exact price they needed and found a home in the school district they were believing for. Her small, kinda crazy step activated the miracle.
Or take Alini and JD. They've been trying to start a family for 9 long years, facing infertility and all sorts of financial struggles. Well, one night, inspired by this very idea of taking a step, Alini went to a baby store and bought a single baby rattle, a physical symbol of the dream they were holding on to.
That tiny little purchase, that was their turning point. A few weeks later, they found out they were expecting. A few months after that, they miraculously bought their first home. And today, they have 4 children. That small step of buying a rattle unlocked a whole new future for them. It's amazing.
We even see this in one of the most famous stories ever told. When Jesus needed to feed thousands of people, he didn't just create food from thin air. He started with the step of one young boy who was willing to give up his entire lunch. That small, seemingly insignificant offering, that was the raw material for a massive miracle.
So we've seen how taking that first step unlocks personal blessings. But the impact, it can be so much bigger. Sometimes your decision to do it afraid doesn't just change your life, it sets a new standard for everyone around you. In the Bible, there's this incredible story of one of King David's mighty men, a guy named Shammah. So when the entire Israelite army saw the enemy coming and fled in fear, Shammah did the unthinkable. He stood his ground, alone, in the middle of a field, and he fought and he won, proving what was possible and frankly shaming an entire army that ran. He set a brand new standard for courage.
This same exact idea is captured in a modern psychological principle called the Bannister effect. For decades, the world's top experts, doctors, athletes, everybody believed running a 4-minute mile was physically impossible for a human being. Then in 1954, Roger Bannister did it. But what happened next is the really important part. Just 46 days later, his record was broken. Once that mental barrier was shattered, the impossible suddenly became the new standard. He gave countless others the belief to do it too.
And your step can do the same thing. The author of our source material shares this great story about how his wife's grandfather, Pastor Eugene Whitcomb, had a vision to build this massive church in the middle of a cornfield when his congregation was still tiny. I mean, everyone said he was crazy, but he did it afraid, and that church ended up impacting thousands of lives, including the author's own, because that's where he eventually met his wife. One person's step created a legacy for generations.
Okay, so all of this brings us to the most important question. We've seen how this works for other people, but now, what about you? What is your next step?
So the author tells this hilarious and also kind of painful story about his first car. It started making this little squeaking sound whenever he braked. And what did he do? He ignored it. He turned up the music. He just pretended it wasn't happening. And eventually, the brakes failed completely right in front of the entire school. The mechanic's diagnosis was brutal. Well, son, what was a $100 problem has now become a $1,000 problem. His fear of dealing with a small problem led to a huge, embarrassing failure.
That squeaking brake is such a perfect metaphor for those little nudges and warnings we get in life, isn't it? That prompting to have that difficult conversation, to finally apply for that job, to forgive someone, or to just start that project. We often ignore those little sounds because we're afraid of what fixing them might require, but inaction only makes the problem bigger.
So let's make this really personal. I want you to actually think about this for a second. What is it for you? What is that thing you know you need to do, but you just keep putting it off? What dream, what change, what step are you avoiding because you're just plain afraid of what's on the other side?
Okay, here's the final takeaway. You don't have to wait for the fear to go away. You don't need perfect conditions. If you've prayed about it, you've planned for it, and you've prepared as much as you possibly can, then there's really only one thing left to do. It's time to step.
Look, that first step might feel totally insignificant. Buying a rattle, collecting a cardboard box, making one phone call. But as we've seen, that one small step of obedience, taken right in the face of fear, has the power to unlock a future you can't even begin to imagine. So what new world is waiting for you?
You ever have one of those moments where you're facing a problem that feels, well, completely impossible, and then out of absolutely nowhere, the perfect solution just appears? It's wild, right? Well, today we're going to dive into this incredible idea called God trees. It's this concept that the solutions to our biggest problems are already out there, waiting for us, long before we even know we need them. So yeah, let's get right into it.
All right, so to really get our heads around this, I want to start with a story. It's a story about what starts as a perfect day, followed by one of those simple mistakes, and then that heart-stopping moment when you realize everything's about to go wrong.
So picture this. It's one of those scorching hot Houston afternoons. You're out on a boat with your friends, just having a great time on the water. A couple of you need to run ashore to grab some food, so you pull up to the pier. Seems simple enough, right? But the second you step onto that dock and give the boat a little shove away, it hits you. That sudden, awful realization. Your keys are still on the boat, and it's already drifting away.
So you yell to your friend, "Toss 'em!" And she winds up like a big league pitcher and just launches them. And for that one split second, everything goes into slow motion. You can see the keys just arcing through the air, your hand is stretched out as far as it can go, but you just know it's not going to make it. They sail just inches over your fingertips. They hit the dock once, little bounce, and then splash, gone. They just vanish into that murky lake water. And just like that, everything, your house keys, your car keys, your work keys, they're all at the bottom of the lake, no spares. Oh, that feeling in the pit of your stomach is just awful. You are completely and totally stuck. Okay, but just as that full-blown panic is about to set in, something really bizarre happens. A couple just appears. It feels like they came out of thin air, and they're not just out for a walk. No, they're carrying these long ropes with these big, thick, heavy-duty magnets on the ends. I mean, who does that?
And get this, it turns out this was no coincidence. Not at all. This couple, they had come to the lake that day for one reason and one reason only, to find lost metal stuff at the bottom. So they toss their ropes in, and I'm not kidding, within minutes you hear a clink. One of the magnets has got them. They pull them up. Your keys. It's an absolute miracle.
This whole experience, it just points to this really powerful idea, right? What if that couple, with their very specific tools and their very specific purpose for being there, what if they were the solution before the problem even happened? And that's the core idea we're digging in today. The idea that for every single challenge we face, a solution might already be out there, fully prepared.
All right, so let's take that modern-day miracle on the lake and connect it to this powerful metaphor from a really ancient story. Because this is where we get the whole concept of the God tree.
So what exactly is a God tree? Well, think of it like this. It's a person, or maybe an idea, or an opportunity that has been divinely prepared and specifically placed to make up for an area where you're limited, where you come up short. It's like a pre-planted solution for a problem you don't even have yet.
And to really see this in action, we gotta look at the story of a guy named Zacchaeus. Now, Zacchaeus was a super rich, super powerful tax collector. But he had one limitation that all his money couldn't fix. He was short. And one day, a huge crowd gathers to see Jesus, and suddenly his height becomes a massive problem. He literally can't see over anybody.
So what does he do? Zacchaeus runs ahead of the whole crowd, and what does he find? A sycamore tree. But hang on, think about this for a second. That tree didn't just magically sprout up for him right then and there. No way. That tree had been growing for years, maybe even decades. It was a long-term solution planted way in the past for problems Zacchaeus would have in the future. See? That tree, that was his God tree.
And look, this isn't just some ancient story that doesn't apply to us. This whole idea of coming up short, it's completely universal. Every single one of us has an area in our life where we feel that limitation, right? That persistent gap between where we are and where we want to be.
We all have a but. Seriously, think about it for your own life. I'm awesome at making money, but I have no clue how to manage it. Or I can start a relationship no problem, but I can't for the life of me keep one. Or maybe my business is finally growing, but I'm just overwhelmed with anxiety. Everybody's got a but. It's that one area where we desperately need a God tree to come in and make up the difference.
You know, once this concept really clicks, you start to see the pattern everywhere. It's like suddenly these pre-prepared solutions start popping up in all kinds of stories, big and small.
So take this other example. A family moves clear across the country to a brand new city. They're totally disconnected from family, feeling completely unprepared. But pretty soon after they move in, their neighbor, a retired military guy named Greg, comes over and introduces himself. And over the next few years, he becomes their go-to for everything. Help, advice, you name it. Greg was their God tree, planted in that exact neighborhood long before they ever dreamed they'd need him.
Or hey, think about Moses. He's chosen for this huge task, leading an entire nation. But he's got a major but, a speech impediment. He comes up short in his ability to communicate clearly. So what was his God tree? It was his brother Aaron. God brought Aaron right alongside him to be his spokesperson, his mouthpiece, perfectly making up for that weakness.
And this totally happens in our careers too. Take this story about a young stylist, Bernice, who's just getting started. One day, a new client named Connie just happens to get put in her chair. Well, Bernice gives her an amazing haircut, and it turns out Connie is incredibly well connected. She tells everybody, all her friends, her business partners, and that one single divine appointment launched Bernice's entire career. You see, Connie was her God tree.
Okay, so this is the really crucial part. This whole idea isn't about just sitting back and waiting for a solution to fall into your lap. No, we actually have a very active role to play in finding and using these God trees. It absolutely requires our participation.
And Zacchaeus, he actually gives us the perfect three-step model. First, get in the path. He intentionally went to where he knew the solution would be. Second, humble yourself. We'll talk more about that in a sec. And third, climb the tree. He actually had to use the provision that was right there in front of him.
Yeah, let's really zero in on that humility piece for a minute. Remember, this was a rich, powerful, dignified man. Can you picture the CEO of a big company sprinting down the street and then scrambling up a tree like a little kid? He just didn't care what anyone thought of him. His desire to overcome his limitation was so much greater than his pride. He was totally willing to look foolish to get to his solution.
And honestly, that's often the biggest battle, isn't it? The main roadblock usually isn't that the solution isn't there. It's that internal voice of pride or fear that tries to distract us. You know that voice. The one that says, "Don't you dare admit you're weak," or, "Oh man, you're gonna look so stupid if you try that." But staying in that humble, receptive position, that's the key. Because it shifts you from a place of panic over your weakness to a place of confident expectation for the solution.
So really, this all leads to a massive shift in perspective. It's a fundamental change in how we look at our own weaknesses and our own problems. It completely reframes the entire struggle.
And this is the big takeaway right here. All those buts in your life, your shortcomings, the areas where you feel like you just constantly come up short, they are not there to stop you. They are there to point you. Think of them like giant directional signs, showing you exactly where to look for the God trees that have been planted just for you. When you start to see it that way, everything changes. Frustration turns into focus, anxiety turns into anticipation.
So I want to leave you with this final thought to chew on. What if that one thing you've always seen as your biggest weakness, what if it isn't a dead end? What if it's not a disqualifier at all? What if it's actually a map?
guiding you straight to the unique provision that's been waiting there for you all along.
Let's be real, we've all got a dream. Something big we're reaching for. But what if I told you the single biggest thing holding you back isn't your talent or your money or even how hard you work? What if it's the people you hang out with every day? Today, we're going to talk about why your dream team is literally the most important piece of the puzzle.
I mean, think about it for a second. Why do we get so hooked on shows like The Office or Friends? We binge watch them, we quote them, we feel like we know the characters. They're not about some lone hero taking on the world by themselves. They're about a group, a team, a tribe. So what is it about these stories of connection that pulls us in so much?
Well, the answer is actually pretty simple. We love those stories because they tap into something deep inside all of us. We are hardwired for connection. We're built to have people in our corner, people who get us, who challenge us, and who bring out the absolute best in us. So if your dream is ever going to become a reality, it needs more than just you. It needs a team.
Right, so let's get into our first section here. We're talking about why you even need a team in the first place, and we're going to bust the myth of the lone wolf. You know, we love this romantic idea of the self-made person who did it all on their own. But what if that's just a story? The truth is, we're just not designed to do life alone.
And this need for connection, it goes way, way back. Think about the story of Adam in the Garden of Eden. He's in literal paradise. Everything is perfect. Everything is described as good. But then, for the first time, one thing is called out as not good. And what was it? It was that he was alone. Even in a perfect world, the one thing missing was a connection. It just goes to show you, needing other people isn't a weakness. It's literally part of our design.
And again, this has nothing to do with being weak. Take the story of Jesus carrying the cross. I mean, he is literally carrying the weight of his entire purpose on his shoulders, and he physically can't do it alone. A man named Simon has to step in and help him carry it. Now, if the Son of God needed help to fulfill his destiny, why on earth would we think we can carry the weight of ours all by ourselves?
Okay, so we've established we need people. That's a given. But here's the thing. It's not just about having a bunch of friends. It's about the quality of those connections. And that brings us to this really powerful idea, this metaphor. You are a seed. And your relationships, that's the soil you're planted in.
And this is so important. The problem is never the potential of the seed itself. Think about it. An acorn seed has all the potential to become a massive, strong oak tree. A great white shark is born to be the king of the ocean. But if you plant that acorn in a tiny little pot with terrible soil, it's not going to grow. If you put that great white shark in a small aquarium, it'll actually die. The potential was always there. The environment is what made the difference.
So, you have to ask yourself, what kind of soil are you in right now? Is it bad soil? You know, rocky ground full of people with limited mindsets who tell you your dreams are impossible? Is it thorny soil, full of people who drag you back into compromising situations or bad habits? Or is it good soil, nutrient-rich, full of encouragement, inspiration, and people who are genuinely invested in your growth?
So it really all boils down to this one very direct question. Take a hard look at the people you spend the most time with, the people you give your energy to, and ask yourself, honestly, are these relationships making me a better person? Are they pushing me forward, or are they holding me back?
Answering that question is step one, and it can be tough. But now we're going to get practical. It's time to actually assess your inner circle. We're going to talk about how to cultivate your soil, how to be intentional about the environment you're planting yourself in so you can actually grow.
So let's break down that bad soil. First, you've got thorns. These are the people who cause you to compromise your values, maybe old friends who always pull you back into habits you're trying to leave behind. Then you've got weeds. These are the people who just spread negativity everywhere, the coworkers who do nothing but complain and gossip. And finally, you have rocks. These are the people with limited mindsets. They might even be people who love you like relatives, but they tell you your dream is impossible because they can't see it. Now this is where it gets really hard, because sometimes the thorns and the rocks in our lives are people we really care about. But this quote right here, man, it's powerful. What you're not willing to walk away from is where you'll stop growing. It takes a ton of courage, but sometimes creating a little distance isn't about being mean. It's about giving yourself a chance to grow.
But let's reframe this for a second. This isn't about being cruel or just ghosting people. Think of it like you're tending a garden. You're not just losing people, you're making room for the right people to come into your life. You're clearing out space for healthier, stronger relationships that will actually help you flourish.
All right, so you've done the hard work. You've weeded the garden a little. Now for the fun part. Who are you looking for? what does this dream team actually look like? Let's talk about the key players you need in your inner circle. First up, you need lifters. There's a story in the Bible where Peter sees a man who's been crippled his whole life just begging, and Peter doesn't just pray for him. The scripture says he took him by the right hand and lifted him up. That's a lifter. They're the people who see you're down, they see you're discouraged, and they don't just stand by. They reach out a hand and actively pull you back up. Next, you absolutely need roof terrors. This comes from this amazing story about a paralyzed man whose 4 friends were trying to get him to Jesus. But the house was so packed they couldn't get in. So what did they do? They climbed up on the roof, tore a hole in it, and lowered their friend down. I mean, come on. Those are the kinds of friends you need. The ones who see an obstacle and say, nope, we're finding a way through. They will fight for you.
You also need elevators in your life. These are the people who, just by being who they are, elevate your thinking. They raise your standards. It's that friend who's always reading, always growing, and it just makes you want to be better. It's the mentor who sees potential in you that you don't even see in yourself. They take you to a higher level.
And finally, this one might be the most intimate and crucial role on your team. You need someone who saves you from yourself. We all have blind spots, right? Bad habits, negative attitudes, ways of thinking that we just can't see on our own. This person is the one who knows you, loves you, and has earned the right to call you out on it.
So how do you do this? You give someone a life jacket. First, you have to choose someone you trust completely. Then, you literally give them permission. You say, hey, I'm giving you the right to speak into my life, to call out my blind spots. Ask them to hold you accountable. And then the hardest part, you have to be willing to actually listen even when it stings a little. This person isn't trying to hurt you, they're trying to save you.
So the bottom line here is you have to be intentional. You can't just let your inner circle happen by accident. You have greatness inside of you, but it won't come out in the wrong environment. And that leads to a really tough but important question. If you look around and you're the sharpest, most ambitious person in your circle, it's probably time to find a new circle.
Ultimately, it all comes down to this. Your dream is too important. Your purpose is too great to leave it up to chance. The soil you're planted in will absolutely determine the size of your harvest. So I'll leave you with this to really think about. Who is on your team?
Welcome. Today, we are diving into something huge, the incredible power of consistency. And we're going to do it through the story of a very, very unique tree. Trust me, this idea could completely change how you look at your daily grind.
So let's start with a bit of a puzzle. Think about the Chinese bamboo tree. Does a massive 90-foot tree like that grow in just 6 weeks, or does it take 5 years? The answer really gets to the core of what we're talking about today.
All right, so you plant the seed. You do everything you're supposed to. You water it, make sure it gets sunlight, you tend the soil, you're doing it all. And after an entire year of that consistent care, you see nothing, absolutely nothing above the ground.
Okay, year 2 rolls around. You keep on watering, you keep on caring for it, you stay consistent, and what happens? Still nothing. Not a sprout, not a leaf, no sign of life at all. You'd really start to wonder if anything is even happening down there.
By year 3, you can imagine the doubt is starting to get pretty loud. I mean, is all this effort even worth it? It probably feels like you're just watering dirt at this point. But the consistency continues.
4 full years. 4 years of this daily, mundane, totally unseen work, and you have absolutely zero to show for it on the surface. Honestly, most of us would have given up a long, long time ago. But then, in the 5th year, something truly unbelievable happens. The bamboo tree doesn't just sprout, it literally explodes out of the ground. It grows 90 feet. That's like a 9-story building in just 6 weeks. So, let's go back to our question. Did it grow in 6 weeks, or did it take 5 years and 6 weeks?
And the answer, of course, is 5 years and 6 weeks. This brings us to what we can call the bamboo tree principle. The real question is, what on earth was happening during all that time when it looked like nothing was going on? Well, here's the core idea. For 4 solid years, that tree was building a massive, incredibly complex root system underground. It was creating the foundation it needed to support the explosive growth that was about to happen. Without all that hidden work, that 90-foot stalk would have just toppled right over.
So, what does this have to do with us? Well, this bamboo principle speaks directly to all those little, unseen, mundane things we do every single day. You know, the work that nobody claps for, the work that nobody even sees.
The trick is to completely change your perspective on this stuff. Don't think of those hidden tasks as pointless. No, this is your time for root development. See, being your best when no one is watching, that's how you prove you're ready to handle the big opportunities and blessings that are just around the corner.
I mean, think about the story of Noah. He was given this colossal, totally ridiculous-sounding task: build a giant boat. So for decades, with just simple tools, he kept on building, day after day, facing mockery and criticism, with not a single cloud in the sky. He had to finish the job before the breakthrough ever showed up. And here's the crucial point. Noah's job was to swing the hammer, to cut the wood, to build the boat. That's the part he could do. He couldn't make it rain. He couldn't round up all the animals. His consistent daily work just prepared the way for the miracle that was way beyond his control. But what about those times when it feels like we're not just working in the shadows, but we're completely stuck? When it feels like we're just waiting around, not even making progress underground? How do we start to reframe that? It's kind of like being on an airplane that's waiting to land. From your window seat, it just feels like you're endlessly circling. But up in the cockpit, the pilot knows they're in a strategic holding pattern. They're waiting for air traffic control to align everything on the ground for a perfect, safe landing. That wait isn't a mistake, it's a critical part of the preparation.
This next story just illustrates a purposeful delay perfectly. A guy named Jairus is in a total panic. His daughter's dying. But on the way to help, Jesus gets interrupted, and he stops. And while they're delayed, the absolute worst news arrives. His daughter is gone. It seems like that delay cost him everything.
But just look at what happened next. Because of that agonizing delay, the situation got worse, which meant the miracle had to get bigger. Jairus asked for a healing, which is amazing, but what he got was a resurrection, which is on a whole other level. While he was waiting, the miracle was actually growing.
And this is just so important to get. What God does in us while we wait is every bit as important as the thing we are waiting for. The waiting period is when our faith gets deeper, our character gets stronger. We're being prepared to actually handle the blessing when it finally comes.
So, how do we keep going? Right? When we're tired, when we feel like we've tried it all, how do we find the strength to believe that maybe, just maybe, we are one step away from our own breakthrough?
Imagine this. You're a pro fisherman. You've been out on the water all night long. You've cast your net, let's say, 99 times, and you've caught nothing. Zero. You are beyond exhausted, you're frustrated, and you're ready to pack it in and go home with nothing to show for it.
Then, some stranger on the shore calls out and tells you to try again. Just cast your net one more time. After 99 failures, every bone in your body is probably screaming, "No way!" But for some reason, you decide to do it.
And that 100th cast results in a catch so huge it's literally breaking the nets. It's more fish than you've seen in months. The breakthrough wasn't on the first try or the 50th, it was on the 100th.
And this, right here, is the raw power of consistency. You might feel like you are on your 99th attempt right now, your 99th job application, your 99th difficult conversation, your 99th prayer. You just never know if that next try, that 100th cast, is the one that will change everything.
So let's end with this one thought, bringing it all full circle. Your breakthrough, just like that bamboo tree, is growing underground right now. It's being prepared. The real question isn't if it's coming, it's are you doing the consistent work today to build a root system strong enough to handle it when it arrives? Are you getting prepared?
So what if you weren't fighting your battles all by yourself? Today, we're going to dive into this really powerful idea from a Christian faith perspective that there's this positive force, a kind of divine favor that's actually following you, especially when you need it the most. Let's get into it. You know that feeling, right? We've all been there. You're facing some challenge, maybe at work, in a relationship, or even just inside your own head, and it just feels huge, like it's all on you. That feeling of being totally alone, just bracing for whatever's coming next. To really get a handle on this idea, I want to start with a story. So picture this. You've got a 7th grader, he's walking home from school all by himself, and then he sees them up ahead, a group of older bullies, and he just knows it's his turn. There's nowhere to go. So they surround him. He's just preparing for the worst. The main guy opens his mouth to say something and then just stops. He and his friends, they just freeze. Their eyes are locked on something behind the kid. And whatever it is, it terrifies them because without a single word, they turn and they just bolt. So, what in the world just happened? He turns around and there they are, his older brother, a ninth grader, with two of his massive friends, and they are running full speed right at him. In that split second, the bullies realized something really important. This kid wasn't alone. Somebody bigger and a whole lot stronger had his back. And that right there, that's the core idea we're going to unpack today. That story is just the perfect metaphor for this central concept. Because it's not just about having a big brother. It's about the belief in an unseen, protective force that is always on your side. A force the source material calls favor. Okay, so what exactly is favor in this context? Well, it's described as a force of goodness and mercy that literally follows you. And here's the crucial part. It's not something you have to earn. It's not about being perfect. In this way of thinking, it's a direct result of your identity as a child of God. Simple as that. This idea is captured so well in this famous line from Psalm 23. It doesn't say goodness and mercy might show up or that they'll visit on good days. Nope. The word is follow, like they are constantly right behind you wherever you go. All right, so I know what you're probably thinking. It's the obvious question, right? If you're so favored, why do bad things still happen? Why are there still storms? Well, this next part explores a fascinating idea that maybe favor doesn't always look the way we think it should. Let's take a look at the story of the disciples on the Sea of Galilee. Now, they weren't in that storm because they messed up or did something wrong. Actually, it was the exact opposite. They were in that boat because Jesus himself had told them to go across the lake. They were doing the right thing, smack in the middle of God's will, and they still sailed right into a life-threatening storm. So in the middle of the chaos, in the dark, they see this figure walking on the water. And their first reaction, pure terror. They think it's some kind of ghost coming to finish the job. But what looked like their destruction was actually their salvation, walking right towards them. And this is where it gets really interesting when you apply that to your own life. You know, we pray for a smooth journey, but maybe favor sends a protective storm to steer us away from something much worse. We get so disappointed when a door closes on a job we wanted, but maybe that door closing was favor protecting us from a toxic workplace. That breakup that hurt so bad, maybe, just maybe, it was favor saving you from years of heartache. It kind of reframes everything, doesn't it? Okay, so let's take that idea one step further. Favor isn't just about protecting you from the tough stuff. Sometimes it's about sustaining you through it. It's about favor following you right into the fire. And there is no better example of this than the story of Joseph. I mean, just look at this journey. It is a wild ride. It starts with this big dream, but then it just nosedives into betrayal, slavery, and being wrongly thrown in prison. We're talking years and years of a terrible detour. But that's not where the story ends. And here's the amazing part. Even in those absolute worst moments, favor was still working. As a slave, the Bible says he succeeded in everything he did. In prison, of all places, the warden ended up putting him in charge of the whole operation. Favor followed him into places he never, ever wanted to be. And that last point is so powerful. You can be completely forgotten by people, but you're never forgotten by God. So, we've been talking about endurance and getting through the hard times. But there's another side to this coin, the sudden breakthrough. That moment when everything changes, and it happens way sooner than you ever could have imagined. Here's a great way to think about it in today's world. You order something online, right? And the email says it's scheduled to arrive on Tuesday. So you're like, okay, cool, Tuesday. Then, Saturday afternoon, knock, knock, it's on your doorstep. You know that little feeling of surprise and delight? That's the idea. A sooner-than-expected delivery. Let's see how this plays out in a much bigger way. In the book of Acts, the Apostle Peter gets arrested, and we're not talking about some small-town holding cell. This is maximum security. He's bound with 2 chains between 2 guards with a total of, get this, 16 guards assigned to him. From a human perspective, there is absolutely no way he's getting out. But while his friends are across town praying for him, something totally wild is happening. An angel just shows up in the cell. The chains literally fall off his wrists. The huge iron prison doors just swing open all by themselves. He is led out, right past all the sleeping guards. A complete, unbelievable, miraculous jailbreak. So Peter walks across the city to the house where his friends are, still praying for his release, and he knocks on the door. Think about that. The very answer to their prayers is standing on their doorstep while they are still inside asking for it. The miracle had arrived sooner than expected. So if this favor can get you through storms and bring these incredible breakthroughs, what's it all for? Is it just for our own benefit? Well, this final piece might be the most important part of the whole idea. Its purpose is this: you are blessed to be a blessing. And this brings us right back to Joseph. It all comes full circle. Years later, he's the prime minister of Egypt, and his brothers, the very same ones who sold him into slavery, are now standing in front of him, terrified. And he says this to them. He reframes his entire life of suffering. He realizes it wasn't just about him getting a promotion. It was all designed to put him in a position to save countless other people from starvation. So the ultimate takeaway here is that favor is a resource. It's something entrusted to you, not just for your own comfort or success, but for you to manage wisely. It's meant for making a difference, for lifting other people up, for bringing goodness into whatever situation you find yourself in. And that brings us to our final thought, a question for you to take with you. If you truly believed, deep down in your bones, that a force of goodness and mercy was always following you, that heaven had your back no matter what, how would that change the way you live? What brave thing might you do? What would you do differently, starting today? You ever feel like you're on a treadmill, just constantly running to prove you're good enough? Well, today we're going to dive into a pretty powerful idea from our source material, the incredible freedom that comes when you finally realize you have absolutely nothing to prove. To really get our heads around this concept of unchanging value, our source kicks things off with this amazing real-world metaphor. Let's just call it the lesson of the $100 bill. Okay, so imagine this. I'm holding up a brand new, perfectly crisp $100 bill. It's flawless. And I ask you a simple question. How much is this worth? $100, obviously. But then, what if I start to mess with it? I take it and I just crumple it up in my fist until it's a tight little ball of paper. Now, how much is it worth? Still $100, right? Of course. Okay, let's take it even further. I throw it on the ground. I step on it, grind it into the floor, maybe drag it through some dirt. Now I pick up this dirty, wrinkled, completely beat up bill, and I ask you one last time, how much is it worth now? And you know the answer. It's still worth $100. And that right there is the entire point. It doesn't matter what you've been through, what mistakes you've made, or how beaten up you might feel. Just like that $100 bill, your deep, intrinsic value has not changed one single bit. So if our value is constant, why do we so often feel like we're not enough? I mean, especially now, right? In the age of social media, where it feels like everyone's life is a perfect highlight reel. Well, according to our source, it's because we fall into a trap. We start using the world's flawed yardsticks to measure ourselves. We judge our worth by our performance, what we can do. We base it on our possessions, the stuff we own. And we chase it through popularity, how many likes we get, what people think of us. Okay, let's look closer at this, because this distinction is absolutely crucial. Your net worth, that's your bank account, your job title, your car, all that stuff can go up and down. It changes. But your self-worth, that's about who you are. It's constant. It's absolute. You can't add to it. You can't subtract from it. It just is. So what's the antidote to this whole comparison trap? Well, it's about stopping the search for value out there and instead looking inward and really embracing the unique way you were made. I mean, think about it. The source puts this so well. You weren't mass-produced. From your own unique thumbprint to the specific sound of your voice to the way you walk, you're a total original. There are 8 billion people on this planet, and not a single one of them is a copy of you. This whole idea connects perfectly to a story we all know, David and Goliath. But let's look at it from a different angle. It's not just about a little guy beating a big guy. It's a profound lesson in the power of using your own unique strengths. Think about the choice David had. He was offered the king's armor. I mean, that's the right way to fight, right? The official equipment. But it was heavy. It didn't fit. It wasn't his. So he said no. Instead, he picked up his simple sling, a tool he had spent years mastering. He brought his unique gifts to the fight. And that really begs a huge question for all of us, doesn't it? Are you trying to get through life wearing someone else's armor, trying to live up to their expectations, run at their pace, or use their definition of success? Is the armor you're wearing even made for you? This idea of using your own sling, your own tools, it leads us directly to the next big point, the power of focus, of simply staying in your own lane. And, you guessed it, our source is a perfect story about what happens when we don't. So the author tells this story, it's pretty funny actually, about driving by a friend's house. He was so busy trying to be cool, leaning out the window and waving to get their attention, that he completely failed to notice the pizza delivery car stopped right in front of him. Bam, rear-ended it. And that's such a perfect picture of what happens in life, right? We get so distracted by what other people are doing, what they're posting, what they're achieving. We're so busy looking over into their lane that we completely miss the blessings and sometimes the dangers that are right in front of us in our own. Okay, here's one last analogy from the source that just nails this whole idea. Picture your soul as a tall glass of milk. And at the very bottom, there's this thick, rich chocolate syrup. That's your true value. Now, the short spoon of other people's approval, well, it can stir the milk at the top, but it can never ever reach deep enough to mix in that real value, so you always feel unfulfilled. But the long spoon of knowing your own worth, it goes all the way to the bottom, stirring that chocolatey goodness into every part of who you are. So you take the $100 bill, David's sling, and the chocolate milk, and all of these ideas build up to one final, incredibly freeing truth. The source points to this really powerful moment. Even Jesus' own family was pressuring him, telling him to go to this big festival and perform some miracles to prove who he was. And he just refused. He knew he had nothing to prove. He was secure in his purpose and operated on his own timeline, not for the approval of the crowd. So what does this all mean for you and me? It means you're free. You are free from the pressure to perform for approval. You are free from needing stuff to feel like you matter. And you are free from that exhausting, never-ending chase for applause. Your value isn't something you have to earn. It's already a settled fact. Your identity isn't defined by your job or your social media feed or what anyone else says about you. It's secure. It's constant. It's unchanging. At your very core, you are wonderfully made. So let this just sink in. This is the ultimate takeaway. You can stop striving and comparing and trying so hard. You can just live free and confident and secure by being exactly who you were created to be. And so I'll just leave you with this one final thought to chew on. If you truly, deeply believed that you have absolutely nothing to prove, what's one thing you would finally give yourself permission to stop doing, starting today?
Are you feeling stretched a little too thin lately? You know that feeling like you're constantly operating at 110% with absolutely no room for error? Well, today we're diving into a really powerful idea from our source material, the art of creating intentional space, or what we're going to call margins, in our lives. And you'll see why it's not some kind of luxury, but an absolute necessity.
So, what in the world are these margins we're talking about? To really get to the heart of it, let's start with a surprisingly familiar analogy, one that I think is going to hit home for a lot of you.
I want you to go back in your mind. You're back in school. It is late at night. You've got a big paper due in the morning and you're just staring at that page count and it is stubbornly refusing to go up. So, what do? Well, you get a little creative, right?
Oh yeah, this is a universal experience, isn't it? The assignment says 12-point font, so we nudge it up to maybe 12.5. It asks for double spacing, and somehow we find that triple spacing option that looks almost like double spacing, and the margins pushed out as far as they can possibly go. It's this clever little trick we all use to stretch our content to make it look like we have a lot more to say than we really do.
And here's the big idea, the real takeaway from that little trip down memory lane. As adults, a lot of us are still doing the exact same thing, not with school papers, but with our lives. We are maxing out every single bit of available space, emotionally, physically, with our time, just constantly living right on the edge with no room to breathe.
Now, cheating on an essay, that might just get you a bad grade, but living a life without any margins, that has far, far more serious consequences. The stakes are just so much higher.
You know, the text we're drawing from paints this perfect picture.
Think of your life as a glass of water filled to the absolute brim. Now, when you're that full of commitments, responsibilities, and stress, any tiny little bump, like an unexpected car problem, a sick kid, a delay at work, it causes a spill, a huge mess. Why? Because there was simply no room to absorb the shock.
And we're not just talking about feeling stressed out or tired here. The stakes are so much higher than we think. Living without any margin for error puts your most valuable cargo, your unique purpose, your talents, your gifts, at risk of being compromised or maybe even lost completely.
If you want to see how this plays out in the real world, just look at a truly catastrophic failure, the Exxon Valdez oil spill. For weeks leading up to this disaster, the crew was pushed to their absolute limits, working around the clock with basically no rest. They were completely and totally maxed out. And in March of 1989, that fatigue had devastating consequences. The supertanker hit a reef, and it tore this massive gash in its hull. The result? 11 million gallons of crude oil poured into the pristine waters of Prince William Sound. It was an environmental tragedy on an immense scale, and it was a direct result of pushing human limits way too far.
And when they investigated, what did they find? It wasn't a lack of skill that caused this. It was a lack of rest. The crew had no margins. They were operating past their breaking point, and the valuable cargo they were supposed to be carrying to fuel and support life ended up destroying it instead.
So, how do we avoid this kind of burnout, this kind of disaster in our own lives? Well, for a really powerful lesson in leadership and, frankly, self-preservation, we can actually turn to an ancient story. The story comes from the book of Exodus. You have Moses, he's leading the Israelites through the wilderness, and he's doing absolutely vital work. He's counseling his people, he's solving their problems, but he's doing it from sunrise to sunset. He's trying to be everything to everyone. And he was on the fast track to complete and total exhaustion. Then his father-in-law, Jethro, shows up, and he sees what's happening and immediately gets it. He wasn't questioning how important the work was. He was questioning how Moses was doing it. He saw a leader with zero margins, a leader who hadn't recognized his own very human limits. Jethro's advice was so simple, but so profound. Step 1, he told Moses to just admit that he couldn't do it all himself. Step 2, delegate. Empower other capable people to handle the smaller stuff. And step 3, save your own energy for the biggest, most critical decisions that only you can make. What he was really doing was teaching Moses how to create margins.
And the results? They were absolutely transformative. By setting these boundaries, Moses didn't just save himself from burnout. He actually created opportunities for other leaders to step up and use their gifts. The entire community became healthier, more resilient, and way more effective.
Okay, so let's explore the really surprising benefits that pop up when we intentionally create this kind of space in our own lives. Because it's about more than just avoiding disaster, it's about unlocking our full potential. Our source material points to 3 incredible things that really start to blossom in the margins. Creating that space in your life gives you clarity, it fosters your creativity, and it actually builds your character.
First up, clarity. We already saw how fatigue can lead to absolutely disastrous decisions, right? Well, when we're not running on empty, we can actually step back, we can look at situations with a clear head, and we can respond thoughtfully instead of just reacting out of pure impulse.
Second, creativity. Think about it. When our lives are just constantly noisy and packed to the gills, we tend to just run on old routines. By creating quiet space, literally turning down the volume, we give our minds the freedom to break away and discover new ideas, innovative solutions, and just better ways of doing things.
And finally, character. This one is deep. Look, your skills and your talents can only take you so far. It's your character, your integrity, that sustains success over the long haul. And the margins? That's the workshop. That's where we do the essential inner work, the reflection, and the personal growth needed to build a really strong foundation for our lives. So, let's bring all this together now, and let's think about what this really means for you and your life.
Ultimately, margins are your buffer zone. They're your breathing room. And this is the most important part. It is an intentional act. This doesn't happen by accident. It's the space you purposefully carve out to rest, to think, and to handle life's inevitable surprises without being completely knocked over.
Let's go back to that essay analogy just one last time. A teacher once explained that the margins on a paper aren't just wasted space. They are there for a reason. They're for feedback, for corrections, for encouragement.
And the exact same thing is true for our lives. That so-called empty space is where all the growth happens.
And that brings us to our final and I think most powerful question for you today. If that blank space on the page is where the most important feedback and the most brilliant new ideas are written, what incredible things, what new clarity, what amazing creativity, or what new depth of character could be written in the margins of your life, if only you chose to create them?
You know, we're always told to look for the open doors, right? But what if the most important life-changing doors are actually the ones that slam shut right in our faces? Today, we're going to explore how some of life's biggest rejections might just be its greatest gifts in disguise.
I mean, have you ever really felt that? That sharp, sudden sting of a door slamming shut just when you were about to step through? It's a universal feeling, and man, it hurts.
Maybe it was that job you knew you were perfect for, or the person you thought was the one, or that one big break that just, poof, disappeared into thin air. In those moments, it really feels like you've hit a total dead end.
Okay, but let's just flip the script for a second. What if that painful no was actually a shield? What if it wasn't a rejection at all, but some kind of protection, something that's actually redirecting you to a place that's so much better?
So first, let's talk about the dream of open doors. It's completely natural to want them. I mean, we're basically wired to see an open path as progress, as a big, clear yes from the universe telling us, hey, you're on the right track.
And why wouldn't we love them? Of course we do. An open door is that job offer, it's the proposal, it's the yes we've been waiting for. We see them as blessings, and a lot of times they are. But, and this is a big but, the most powerful blessings aren't always found behind the doors that are wide open.
To really get our heads around this, we need to revisit a really famous story. But we need to focus on a single detail that almost everyone overlooks. It's a story where a closed door wasn't an accident, it was an act of divine protection.
This single line from the story of Noah's Ark, it changes everything. The Lord shut him in. That little phrase completely reframes the whole idea of a closed door. Let's break down exactly what that means.
Just imagine it for a second. After 120 years of work, Noah, his family, all the animals, they're finally on the ark. The rain starts to fall, but the huge, massive door is still open. The story makes a really crucial point here. It wasn't Noah who closed it. Some unseen hand sealed them inside.
So you see, the real blessing wasn't even the ark itself. It was the closed door. It wasn't about shutting Noah out of the world, but about shutting him into safety. That closed door was his protection, his security. It was the very thing that guaranteed he had a future.
And that right there brings us to this powerful idea, rejection as redirection. The concept that sometimes when we hear no, it's only because a much, much better yes is waiting for us down a different path.
This quote just says it perfectly. Now seriously, think back on your own life. That breakup that absolutely devastated you but made room for the true love of your life? That job you were crushed not to get that led you to a career you actually love? That's redirection.
And this pattern is ancient. I mean, take Joseph, betrayed and sold into slavery by his own brothers. Talk about the ultimate rejection. But that exact path led him to a position where he could save an entire nation. Or Leah, who was unloved and overlooked, but became an ancestor of the Messiah. Their rejections were literally their path to greatness.
So here's the crucial point. The rejection wasn't some obstacle to their destiny. It was the vehicle. The closed doors, the pain, the injustice, it was all part of the path that launched them into their ultimate purpose.
Okay, so this all sounds great when we're looking back, right? Hindsight's 20/20. But how do you use this perspective when you're actually standing in front of a closed door? Well, there are two simple but really powerful mental shifts you can make.
The first shift is to practice something called look again. This basically means we have to train ourselves to completely ignore the packaging. We all have this mental picture of what a blessing is supposed to look like, and if an opportunity doesn't show up in that pretty box, we're at risk of overlooking it completely.
Just think about it for a sec. The best gift is in the ugliest box. The engagement ring is hidden in a trash bag. A blind man gets his sight back with mud. God's voice doesn't come in the earthquake or the fire, but in a quiet whisper. The point is, the greatest things in life rarely show up with a big, grand announcement.
All right, this second mental shift is maybe even simpler, but wow, it is a total game changer. It's all about moving a single letter.
You know what happens when a door slams shut, right?
Our brain gets stuck on a loop asking this one question. How am I going to pay my bills? How will I ever get over this? How is this possibly going to work out? We try to figure it all out ourselves.
The shift is to change that one little letter. You stop asking how and you start asking who. Instead of how will I get through this, you ask who is in control, who is my source, who can make a way where there is no way.
Can you feel the difference? It takes all the pressure off you to have all the answers. You stop staring at the size of your mountain and you start focusing on the greatness of your source.
So let's bring this all home now. How does this apply to the closed doors you're facing right now, or maybe the ones from your past that, still sting a little?
Maybe that no you got was actually protecting you from a dead-end job or from the wrong relationship. And maybe it wasn't a final rejection, but a divine delay. Not a no, never, but a not yet, because something so much better is waiting for you.
So I'm going to leave you with this. Look back at the closed doors in your life, the rejections, the detours, all of it, and just ask yourself this one question. What if your greatest disappointment was actually your greatest blessing in disguise?
All right, today we are talking all about power. But, you should probably just forget everything you think you know about influence. Seriously. Because we're not talking about viral videos or brand deals here. Nope. We're going to dive into a totally different kind of power. One that's usually hidden right in plain sight. So let's get into it. It all starts with this really powerful question from a 7-year-old kid named Denver. His mom told him, "You are going to change the world." And he just slowly spun a globe and asked her, "Change it into what?" Wow, right? That innocent question, that's the whole heart of what we're talking about today. See, it's not a question of if we're going to have an impact. The real question is, what kind of impact will we have? Okay, so here's where we're headed. First up, we're going to totally redefine what real influence even is. Then we'll look at the whole fame versus true greatness thing. After that, we'll uncover the surprising source of real power, see a great example of it in action, and then finally, we'll bring it all home and figure out how we can actually change our own world. All right, first section, the real meaning of influence. And yeah, it is so much more than a blue check. I mean, let's start with that word, right? Influencer. Our culture, our first thought is social media stars, brand deals, that whole scene. But what we're digging in today challenges us to think way, way bigger than that. Okay, so check out this definition. Influence is the ability to affect the hearts, behaviors, and development of other people. Now, think about that. According to this, every single one of us, you, me, everyone, we're all influencers. It's not some status you have to earn. It's just part of who you are. Simply by being alive, you're affecting the people and the spaces all around you. You already have it. And this brings us right back to that core question from the beginning. It really reframes everything, doesn't it? The goal isn't to get more influence. The real challenge is to decide how you're going to direct the influence you already have. So what are you building with it? What are you changing your world into? So that leads us to this fundamental conflict. There's this constant pull, a pull towards what the world says is important. Fame, status, position. But the path we're exploring today is completely different. It's a path to what you might call true greatness. And look, this is not a new struggle, not at all. There's this story where the mother of 2 of Jesus' disciples, James and John, she goes right up to Jesus and asks for the best seats in the kingdom for her boys. The best seats. And the other disciples, they get so mad. But here's the kicker. They're not mad because she was wrong to ask. They're mad because she said out loud what they were all secretly thinking. That hunger for status, for position, it's just so deeply human. And Jesus' response to all this was, it was completely countercultural. He just drew a hard line in the sand. He said, look, the world's model is about dominance, about lording it over people. But the model he's talking about, it's the exact opposite. If you want to be a leader, you have to be a servant. If you want to be first, you've got to be willing to be last. Just a total flip. And this slide, this just nails the difference perfectly. Think about it. Seeking attention is all about wanting a spotlight on yourself. It's look at me. But exercising real authority, that's like being a support beam. It's not about being seen. It's about holding other people up. One is for you, the other is for them. Big difference. Okay, so if real authority is all about lifting others up, well, that completely changes how we think about power, right? And there's this fantastic story from the book of Exodus that just illustrates this perfectly. So, here's the scene. You've got Joshua and the army down in the valley, fighting a battle. Meanwhile, up on a hill, Moses is holding up this staff from God. And as long as his arms are up, the Israelites are winning the battle. But, I mean, he's human, right? He gets tired. His arms start to fall. So what happens? These two guys, Aaron and Hur, they come up on either side of him, and they physically hold his arms up until the very end, until the battle is won. And here is the key takeaway, the absolute game changer. The victory didn't just belong to the general fighting in the valley or the famous prophet on the hill. The text actually says it came as a result of Aaron and Hur, two guys whose only job was to support their leader. Think about that. In that moment, the most powerful people on the battlefield were the ones holding someone else up. Okay, now let's look at what might be the ultimate power move. It's a story about a leader, his final meal with his team, and a simple, ordinary towel. I want you to picture this. It's the Last Supper. Jesus and his disciples. They've been walking on these dirty, dusty roads all day long. And the custom back then was that a servant, the lowest person in the social order, would wash their filthy feet when they arrived. But there's no servant. So the disciples just sit there, in this awkward, prideful silence. Nobody wants to do the job of the lowest person in the room. And then Jesus stands up. This is the moment. The text makes it a point to say that Jesus did this knowing that the Father had given him all authority. The one person with every single right not to do this job. He gets up and he picks up a towel. And then he kneels and he washes the dirty, disgusting feet of every single one of his disciples, including Judas, the man he knew was going to betray him in just a few hours. And that towel, it becomes the symbol for this entire idea. It's the ultimate paradox, right? The one with the most power takes on the lowest, most humbling task. And the message couldn't be clearer. Real authority, real leadership, it flows from a place of service, not a place of status. It's not about your title, it's about your towel. Okay, so how do we take this huge countercultural idea and actually use it in our lives? I mean, the whole changing the world thing can feel, well, overwhelming. But the suggestion here is to start small. In fact, like incredibly small. It all starts with this number, 1. Instead of getting paralyzed by the idea of impacting millions of people, the focus shifts to impacting just one person. Your neighbor, your coworker, your teammate. You know, the one person who is right there in front of you. And this story just illustrates that ripple effect perfectly. Back in 1939, there's this teenager named Sam Martin, and every day he'd write a Bible verse on his school chalkboard. Simple act. He invited one of his classmates, a guy named John Osteen, to church. Just one guy. Well, that single invitation to one person set off this massive chain reaction. John Osteen went on to found a church that would eventually reach millions and millions of people. Sam had no way of knowing what that small act of service for just one person would become. There's this ancient proverb that just sums it all up so beautifully. It says, "The world of the generous gets larger and larger. The world of the stingy gets smaller and smaller." A life that's focused on serving others, on using your towel, it doesn't shrink your world, it actually expands it. It leads to more life, more impact, more significance. So we end right back where we started with a question, but it's shifted a little. It's not if you will change the world, but what will you change it into? By serving, by lifting others up, by focusing on the one, you have the power to expand your world way beyond anything you can imagine right now. So the only question left to ask is, how large are you going to make it?
You ever get that feeling that there's more out there for you? That maybe, just maybe, you're playing it a little too small? Well, let's dive right in, because today we're going to talk about why that bigger dream for your life might be closer than you think and what it takes to stop settling.
So, it all starts with this one simple phrase from a little kid. Let's go to Target. Now, I know what you're thinking. What in the world does a trip to Target have to do with living your best life? Well, as you're about to see, it has everything to do with it. You see, that simple little trip brings us to a huge question. And it's one I really want you to think about as we go through this. Are you leaving these incredible opportunities on the table just because you're not asking for them? Are you picking the $5 prize when the whole store is yours?
All right, so let's get into our first story, which is just a perfect example of how we can accidentally limit ourselves without even realizing it. We're going to call it the Polly Pocket Problem.
So here's the deal. The author makes this massive promise to his daughter, Haven. He's desperate to get her to learn to ride her bike without training wheels. So he offers her the ultimate prize, anything she wants from the entire store. I mean, he was ready to buy a big screen TV if he had to. And you know what? She does it. She masters the two-wheeler. So she marches into Target with basically a blank check, walks right past the electronics, past the giant dollhouses, and picks out a $5 Polly Pocket doll. That's it. A $5 toy.
And this is where it clicks. This cute little moment turns into this really profound question for him. Her tiny choice, when she had a limitless opportunity, it made him wonder, how often do I do that? How many times do we all settle for something small when the absolute best is right there for the taking?
And that leads us to such a critical idea. You know, sometimes the biggest thing standing in the way of the best is being okay with what's just good enough.
Think about this ancient story of a blind man's healing. So after a healer touches him the first time, the guy can see, but not clearly. He says people look like trees walking around. Now, let's be honest, that's an amazing improvement. It's way better than being blind. It's good. He could have stopped right there. But the healer wasn't satisfied with good. He went again and pushed all the way to a full, complete restoration.
We see this same exact pattern in another story about people traveling through a desert. Every single day, they got just enough food. It was called manna to get by. And it was good. It kept them alive. But it was just a temporary fix. The real prize, the ultimate promise, was a whole new land, a land of abundance. The trap for them, and for us, is getting so used to the daily good enough that we totally forget about the incredible promise that's waiting.
Okay, so what's the big deal? Let's talk about the real cost of settling, because it isn't just about missing out on something better. Sometimes the cost is just astronomically high.
I want you to try and picture this. We're at the crucifixion in the Gospel of John. There's a Roman soldier just doing his job. He is standing at the foot of the cross, literally inches away from a moment of grace that could change everything for him. Forgiveness, purpose, a whole new life.
And with all that available to him, what does he focus on? What does he walk away with? A piece of clothing. He literally rolls dice to win the man's seamless robe. It's just a powerful and kind of a sobering picture of how you can be standing right next to something life-changing and walk away with, well, with basically nothing.
So if settling is the problem, what's the solution? How do we actually break this pattern? Well, it might just be time to start throwing your nets.
In the book of Luke, we meet this guy Peter. He's a professional fisherman, and he's just had the worst night of fishing in his life. He caught nothing. Zip. He's tired, he's cleaning his nets, he's ready to go home. Then a teacher comes along and tells him, hey, go back out and try again. You can almost hear the sigh in his voice. But then he says this one amazing word, nevertheless. And with that, he goes from logical doubt to just taking a leap of faith.
And what was the result of that nevertheless? It's just insane. It wasn't just a few fish. It wasn't even just one full net. They caught so many fish their nets started to break, and they filled up 2 boats so full they started to sink. That's what can happen when you push past your own limits. And this brings the question right back to us, doesn't it? Are we playing it safe? Are we just casting out one little cautious net because we're afraid of being disappointed? This story dares us to believe for a boat-sinking kind of blessing, to ask for something so big it almost sounds crazy. Now, I know what you might be thinking. A boat sinking with blessings sounds great, but my life feels more like a sinking ship of chaos. And you know what? That is exactly the point. See, living the dream isn't about having a life with no storms. It's about finding peace right in the middle of them. Just listen to the author's attempt at a peaceful family vacation. It starts with a rental car crash, then a trip to the ER in the middle of the night for his daughter's 104-degree fever. The next day, a second trip to the ER after his son runs headfirst into a glass table. And to top it all off, his wife gets the flu. Yeah, so much for relaxing. This reminds me of this awesome story about a painting contest where the theme was peace. The winning painting wasn't some calm, serene landscape. Nope, it was a picture of a raging thunderstorm. But if you looked closely, tucked into a crack in a rock was a tiny bird, sitting peacefully on her nest, totally safe while all this chaos was happening around her. See, that's peace. Not the absence of a storm, but a safe place in the storm.
So let's bring all this home. What's the big takeaway here? It's actually pretty simple, but it's really powerful. Your dream awaits.
This promise from the book of John, it's not about a perfect, trouble-free life. It's about a life that's fuller and richer than we could ever cook up on our own. It's a straight-up invitation to stop settling for the $5 toy and start believing the entire store is available to us.
So maybe we need to redefine what living the dream even means. It's not about having a perfect life. I mean, who has that? It's about having a perspective of faith. It's an internal mindset that believes, even when things are chaotic, that something better is not only possible, but it's at work.
And that leaves us with one last, unavoidable question. This is it. This is your one life. You can choose the temporary fix, or you can hold out for the ultimate promise. You can settle for the robe or reach for something transcendent. The dream is there. It's waiting. The only real question is, are you gonna have the courage to go for it?